Hello, welcome, and sorry. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream with your favorite two Canadians, and one is about to join us here shortly. Hopefully, Forrest. He's planning on being here. He just said he was going to be a couple minutes late, so you're stuck with Rajat and I to get going here anyway. So the title of today's show is Could Bitcoin really hit $1 million this year? And so Rajat and I are going to kick off the conversation to that right here. We're going to be showing a clip from Michael Saylor, his thoughts on this. We're going to share ours. And I think there was a bit of misunderstanding between what Saylor said and what he meant. And so we're going to discuss that as well. So happy Friday, Rajat. Thanks for being here once again today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
I got to change the QR code here, hey, to the Maple Bitcoin one. All right, so let's just kick this off. What are your thoughts on this? We'll get to the Saylor video in just a second here, but what are your thoughts on this? Like, is it reasonable that Bitcoin could actually go from $100,000 in June to 1 million by the end of this year? Is it possible?
I think anything that we say is going to be pure speculation. So let's just start with that. Everything that we say, we don't know where the price is going. For all we know, for all we know, Michael Saylor could be completely wrong. He said there's no crypto winter that's coming, but for all we know, he could be wrong. Maybe price drops way lower than we expected. If, for example, Mike, what's his name? Safety Namus, he said that there could be a 70% drop in the short term. And we're at that. He said that we might be peaking. He said this with Natalie Brunell on an interview. But I don't know. I think it could happen at the end of this year. Anything is possible, really, right? If the world figures out what Bitcoin is, then we could easily hit 1 million by the end of the year. We could hit 10 million by the end of the year. But I mean, you have to be realistic. What if that doesn't happen? What would the price go to if people don't figure it out? For all we know, it could be at 500,000, 300,000. Even it could even just move sideways until the end of the year, just to piss people off and shake them out. Right?
It seems like that's what's happening right now, whether it's intentional or not. I would lean towards it is more intentional, because the longer this thing chops sideways, not only does it keep the average person out, somebody who's not in Bitcoin yet, because there's no news. When there's no news, nobody really cares about it. But the other thing is people who got in, let's say when the new administration took over in the US, and they've been kind of chopping sideways for 6 months now, and they're getting tired of it, and they're looking for cheat codes and shortcuts, and they're losing patience with it. And so it is sad to see. So it would make sense if you were somebody who was trying to accumulate as many Bitcoin and Satoshis as possible, that you would want this thing to trade sideways for as long as possible. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if we hit $1 million this year. And the reason I say that is just because simple supply and demand. And Saylor actually talks about how much supply there is, 450 Bitcoin every day, versus how much Bitcoin is actually being scooped up by some of these bigger entities here. So at some point, it's going to be mathematically impossible for Bitcoin not to be $1 million. I think that's it's inevitable. You and I both agree with that. Big shout out, by the way, everybody in the chat here. The comments are coming in pretty fast here. I'm gonna have to do my best to keep up with them. But as you can see scrolling on the screen here, if you do have any questions, we're gonna address them a little bit later in the show. So put them in capitals and we will star them. We will hopefully address them later. And just like the Bitcoin blockchain, if you do have a priority, if you want to make sure that we do address your question or discussion, you can send us a super chat, or you can send a zap on Zapstream, or that QR code right beside Rajat's head there. You can send a zap with a message and we will get to it that way. So should we, what do you think, Rajat? Should we wait for Forrest to watch the video, or should we kick it off here right now?
No, let's kick it off here. Some people in the comments are saying that at the top you see these ridiculous predictions, but when you really understand how Bitcoin works, I don't know if we're at the top. There's never going to be a top. I mean, that over the long term, we're always just going to keep rising. But even in the short term, I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't think we're at a top, because it seems like the institutional investors are just starting to really pick up their pace of buying. They're not slowing down. There's no way that they're slowing down. And keep in mind that all these S&P 500 companies have none. So the best is yet to come. The best is definitely yet to come. We could hit $1 million by the end of this year. But again, I mean, I think I'm more realistic. I mean, if you want to go based on just what makes people not feel uncomfortable, because $1 million by the end of this year is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's not easy to think about. Most people feel like they don't have enough Bitcoin. Let's say your goal is to get to 1 Bitcoin and you have 0.5. If Bitcoin moves at if this moves sideways and it just stays at 100K, then of course you're probably going to get to 1 Bitcoin at some point. But if it hits $1 million by the end of this year, your goal is done. You're not going to be able to reach it unless you increase your income by 10 times, 15 times, 20 times. You're not going to hit that 1 Bitcoin goal. So I think it's kind of scary for people, first of all. And then there's the other side of things where there are people who probably have a lot of Bitcoin and they're thinking, I'm going to sell Bitcoin at $1 million. And they weren't expecting it to hit it by the end of this year. So they're going to have a pleasant surprise, right? So if let's say somebody has 15 Bitcoin and they're thinking, I want to retire when this Bitcoin is worth $15 million. Maybe they'll be able to retire by the end of this year. And that's huge, right? But it also scares people because it's very painful to see what you wanted if you haven't accumulated enough, if you to see Bitcoin just go up and up and up and just skyrocket. But again, maybe we're being too bullish here. Maybe the comments are right.
Maybe
Right?
they're wrong though. Maybe we're bearish.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like that's, I think people really need to understand the point is that there has never been an asset like Bitcoin before in human history. So like whatever's in your mind about what is possible, what seems too extreme, what seems too bullish, it doesn't matter. That's just your opinion on it because we've never had anything like this asset before. So Rajat's opinion doesn't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. We're just trying to break down what's possible and why that's possible. And it's strictly based on supply and demand. And that's pretty objective, right? So I think the only thing that could potentially change this or influence this in any way, kind of what's been happening, in my opinion, at least, is the amount of paper Bitcoin floating around. That's really the only thing that could suppress the true value and the true price of Bitcoin based on the simple supply and demand dynamics we're seeing right now, is paper Bitcoin and people claiming that they have Bitcoin that they don't necessarily have.
Do you really think that's happening?
I do.
Who do you think is, or I guess who's adding this paper Bitcoin to the market? Who do you think?
Coinbase.
Coinbase, really? I thought you were going to say Coinbase too. But why would they do that? What do they get out of taking that risk? Because if Bitcoin explodes, let's say it does go to 1 million by the end of this year, and they haven't, basically when you're selling paper Bitcoin, you're kind of shorting it because you're giving Bitcoin to somebody else that you may not even have. And if Bitcoin's price rises too fast and they try to withdraw it, this is exactly what happened with FTX, right? So if they're issuing paper Bitcoin, do you really think that they want to risk going bankrupt over something like
I
this?
think it would be, I don't think it would be like a very cut and dry example like FTX was, in the sense where they were selling all this Bitcoin, but they really had zero. I think that Coinbase has so many different products and so many different things built in that ecosystem that they can kind of get away with this without it being like illegal or something like that. And they're just like not being fully transparent with how much they actually have. Because as we're about to listen here with Saylor, like this, the simple math on this is mind blowing in the sense that there is only so much new supply coming onto the market every day, 450 Bitcoin. And there's so much demand today from strategies, from Metaplanets, from all these, from BlackRock, from the ETFs. It just doesn't make sense that the price is staying flat right now. So whatever that is, I don't know. That's the only thing that makes sense in my head.
I think it's just long-term holder selling. I think it's people who've had Bitcoin for, let's say, they've had it for like 20 years, or not 20 years. They've had it since like $20. They've had it since $15, $10, right? They got thousands of Bitcoin into them, just selling 1, 2, 5, 10, just dumping them on the market. It's not really a big deal because they have so much, right? And then there's other people who have thousands of Bitcoin, tens of thousands of Bitcoin, and to them, dumping a little bit is not really that big of a problem.
No, that's fair. And you're right. Like I would never disagree with the fact that that is happening right now. And we're pretty much at a point where almost nobody's in a loss right now. So when you're in a position like that, there's always going to be people taking profits, whether they got in at $1,000 or $80,000, they're still in a position of profit right now. And so there is more incentive for people to sell who don't have that conviction over what's going on here and holding on to this asset for as long as they possibly can. So I do agree that that's definitely a contributing factor to this. But I also think that there is some funny business happening behind the scenes And the reason I say it is because I think that we're kind of at the stage now where most people on this planet have heard of Bitcoin in one way or the other. They might have a negative opinion on it or a positive one. They might understand it. They might have a very low understanding of it. But most people have heard of Bitcoin. And so I think that these entities like the BlackRocks of the world, like some of these public companies and hedge funds, the Cantor Fitzgeralds of the world, they were waiting for this to happen where most people have heard of Bitcoin. And I think that the people who are getting into it, who are starting to understand this asset a little bit better, are also realizing the fact that, hey, we can't print any more of this. We can't influence how much supply there is, regardless of the demand for this asset. We can't create more of it. And therefore, we have to take it from the people who have it today. So, Rajat, you kind of alluded to the fact that the people who got here earlier are selling some. But I also think that the longer that they can keep this price down, the longer they can keep the average person out, and therefore they can accumulate more kind of behind our backs in a way, right? Like if Bitcoin was running up, there'd be a ton of retail interest. There'd be a lot of people trying to get it. And again, this is an asset that isn't just scarce, it's absolutely scarce. And so with that in mind, they have to find ways to get it from our hands. And whether that is running the price up or boring people to death, this is kind of like their only strategy that they have now to take it from the average person.
Yeah, and I think Forrest had the perfect video on this. Bitcoin is max pain. That's
Right.
exactly what we're going through right now. I think the thing about Bitcoin is that it does the opposite of what you want it to do at any time. No matter what happens, it's always going to do the complete opposite. If you expect it to go up, it's going to go down. If you expect it to go down, it's going to go up. If you think it's going to go sideways, then it just absolutely explodes. Like it just does what you don't expect because over time, that's where the pain comes from. The pain comes from people getting bored and then forgetting about Bitcoin, just completely forgetting and just not even realizing what they're missing out on. Because think about it, there's a lot of people who come out of they just come out of the woodwork and they just start saying that, oh, Bitcoin's falling. Like when Bitcoin went to 110K and then it dropped to 107K, 3K, a 3K drop, and somebody commented on one of my Twitter posts. He said, oh, Bitcoin is down. What are you going to do now? Your asset is down, but it's up from 0 to 107K. Right. And that's people don't see that. Normal retail investors don't have a long enough time horizon to see that. They just see the short term, they see day to day. And I feel like there's actually, I feel like this actually applies to stock market as well. If you go on to, let's say, even just Coinbase or ShakePay, the first chart that you see is the 1 day chart.
Yeah.
And that kind of scares people. It makes people think, oh, it's going up or it's coming down. So I'm going to buy or I'm going to sell. And they see that, they see the short term, and then they immediately just start dumping their money into it, or they start dumping their Bitcoin when they panic and sell or they panic and buy.
Yep. And it's crazy. Like even if you think back 6 months ago, right now, like I remember having conversations with people, and we had all these different things planned when Bitcoin was going to hit 100K. Like it seemed like it was going to be such a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
to going from 58K, whatever we were stuck at forever there, to like 70 to 80 to 90. It seemed like a huge hill to climb. But now we're here, and to me, I really think that 100K is much closer to the floor price for Bitcoin now than it is for the top of this cycle.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great point. I would be I mean, I'm not going to say it's not going to go below 100K, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't.
Yeah, that's
I
that's
think
kind
that
of
would
what I
be,
mean too, right?
yeah. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it never goes below. I think 60K is done. The last all-time high is gone. I don't think we're ever going to go back to that because we went through that, what, 3 times, right? We got
At
through it
least three. Yeah.
in 2021, then we got through it in early 2024, and then we got through it in late 2024. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to that level again. Even the last drop, it went all the way down to 74,900 or so. Even that was above the early 2024 high.
Right.
Right. So I think that it just shows you Bitcoin runs out at every price. This is your opportunity to buy at these prices is eventually going to be gone. Eventually,
Yep.
there's going to be nobody selling at these prices anymore. At some point, you're going to see that the price is so high that whatever Bitcoin you can get today you're not going to be able to buy it with, if you can buy it with 10% of your paycheck today, in the future, you won't be able to buy it with the entire paycheck that you're getting.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, a couple good resources here that I wanted to share with people today. Actually, on this note, you can kind of hey, look who it is, our man Forrest.
Yes.
Hello,
Made it.
welcome, and sorry for being late. What's up, guys?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Okay,
All right.
Forrest. Well, we've been talking about the price of Bitcoin. It's not something that we do very often on Maple Bitcoin, is get too obsessed with the price. And that's kind of what I wanted to say as a follow-up to Rajat's comment there, because he said that Bitcoin usually does the opposite of what you expect it to do. And I think that if you kind of have that in your mind, the best thing that you can do in that situation is just have no expectations.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have expectations, then you're not going to do anything stupid. And so just focus on a couple things, which is adding value to the world, generating income, saving that income in Bitcoin, and learning how to protect that Bitcoin. That's really all that people need to be concerned with right now. I mean, we like talking about this stuff because it's fun, but
We fixate a lot on the US dollar denominated price of Bitcoin. I think the only reason that it's important is because it really sums up a lot of other metrics, like people investing and holding their value in Bitcoin. But in reality, we're denominating in something that it's created to replace. Like, it really doesn't matter what the price of it is, because again, I mean, people say this all the time, but it really takes a little bit of while to sink in, or some extra explanation. But one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Bitcoin is denominated in itself. Yeah.
I got a kick out of, I think it was River. They rolled out a browser extension, and it was the price of Bitcoin, and all it says literally every time you check it is just one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's a good reminder, right? So it's absolutely true. And the one thing I was going to share here just before you got here, Forrest, was a couple different resources that I came across recently. And this just gives people a really good idea of what this asset's going to be. Because when you hear these different numbers, you're like, well, that's crazy. It would never get to that. But when you actually look at this thing objectively, using like a 30, 40, 50% compound annual growth rate, like the numbers are staggering. So let's say that you're somebody out there right now who has $10,000 that you could put in lump sum into Bitcoin, and you want to put $100 every week as your DCA, and you stretch this thing out for 10 years, and you scroll this thing over here to 40% of compound annual growth rate, and you can see what this is going to be worth to you in 10 years from now. So your total investment was $62,000 between your lump sum and your DCAs. And the future value of that is $722,000 US for a profit of 660. And then you slide this thing out to be 20 years, and it's all of a sudden $21 million. So this is the power of compounding. These numbers seem crazy, but this is like very objective math when you factor in compounding. And you might say, well, 40% is high, Jory, you're an idiot. But like, is it? Like, nobody's really even here yet. I don't think we've hit the steep part of the adoption curve anywhere close to that yet. So 40% might be a joke. Might be 80.
Can you try with 20% though, just to show what it would look like?
So even at 20% compound annual growth rate there, you've invested a total of 114,000 over 20 years, and your purchasing power is now $1.45 million US.
Wow.
So, I mean, even if you think about this, Rajat, because you were talking about like, don't get concerned about, like the longer you wait to do this, the less you're going to end up with. Like, look at this. Even after all that 20 years of DCing every week in a lump sum, you still have 35 million sats. That's what that's worth. So it's not like that's 5 Bitcoin or something like that. Like, that's 35 million sats.
Yeah, that puts everything into perspective. I mean, that return on investment, 1,172%. I mean, 20% per year. I mean, it's really good. Like, that's a very good return, especially from like TradFi. But when it compounds on top of it, like that's every single year, then 20% on the previous year. And, you know, that compound interest, right? It's the eighth wonder of the world, or whatever that saying is. It's insane what it becomes. And Yeah, I mean, this is something we've never seen before. We've never seen something with absolute scarcity. So, as Jor alluded to, is 40% crazy? Maybe we're underselling this, because this is something with a huge amount of future demand and and an inelastic supply. So that combination of things can create massive price movements to the upside, because it's the only variable in that can move to draw out sellers.
Yeah, I think the most volatile parts of the market are still yet to come. I think people are thinking that, oh, the last maybe 15 years, 16 years were what determines what's going to happen in the future. But no, in the past, it was all retail investors. Retail investors don't have the same capability to take on debt and to fund operations as institutional investors. So we're going to see the price rise like crazy, but then I think we're also going to see the price fall like crazy, because that leverage is
Mhm.
like a house of cards. Unless let's say the institutions that they borrow money from, they're willing to accept Bitcoin in payments. So let's say instead of having to pay back US dollars, they just take your Bitcoin. In that case, it's going to be different. But if they just sell your Bitcoin, if they sell the Bitcoin of these institutions that eventually do go bankrupt, then we could see more than an 80% drop. I mean, that would be absolutely insane. But let's even say at that point, if Bitcoin's at $1 million, we started this off talking about how Bitcoin could hit $1 million by the end of
Mhm.
this year. If it drops 80% from $1 million, it's still at 200K. You're still paying more than what you're paying today,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's a few really interesting things there.
Yeah,
I think in the future, there's the chance of you being able to get some kind of loan on your Bitcoin at very low rates, just because of the potential for the person giving you that loan to acquire your Bitcoin if you were to default, if you were to really screw up. So
yeah,
they would take on that payment in fiat dollars, if those still exist, I guess, at that point, just for the opportunity of having the chance to acquire your Bitcoin at a lower cost than the market. The other thing here too is, we've already seen this with corporations. We see this with individuals. We see debt creation directly for the acquisition of Bitcoin, and debt creation of fiat currency. Bitcoin is a response to the over debt creation of fiat currency, the instability of fiat currency, the money debasement. So it's like perpetuating the problem of fiat and acquiring Bitcoin by doing that. So it's like this double attack, it's a speculative attack, I guess. But yeah, it creates more of the problem, while that individual or corporation acquires more of the solution, which is Bitcoin.
yeah, yeah. That's really well said.
Mikkel says Rajat is showing you guys streaming on Zapstream. Yes, we are. Our Maple Bitcoin account is streaming on Zapstream, so you can find that if you're uncomfortable here on YouTube. You can go over to sats.gg, sats.gg, and you can find our stream over on Zapstream. Okay, so let's on this note, I think that let's watch this video from Michael Saylor here and see what he thinks on this. So basically what his thesis on this is just strictly based on the supply and demand, very objective math on new supply of Bitcoin versus new demand coming into Bitcoin every single week here. So I'll start this from the top. And so we'll watch this. This is on the experts at Bloomberg, crypto. So here we go. Crypto winter is not coming back, according to Michael Saylor. Let's see what he has to say.
How do you expect the asset to continue a price increase at these levels that we've seen? I mean, can it keep that up over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years? And at what point do we see, winter coming again? Because that's been a permanent fixture of this asset class, right? It's gone from 0 or 1,000 to 20, and then back down to 3 or 4, and then up to 50, and then back down to 15, and now up to 110. Like, when does it drop again?
Winter's not coming back. We're past that. We're past that phase. If Bitcoin's not going to 0, it's going to $1 million. And you have all the evidence you need to determine that, right? The President of the United States has determined he supports Bitcoin. The cabinet supports Bitcoin. Scott Pheasant supports Bitcoin. Paul Atkins has shown himself to be an enthusiastic believer of Bitcoin and digital assets. Quintez at CFTC feels the same way. The banks are going to custody Bitcoin. Bitcoin has gotten through its riskiest period. The accounting has been corrected. There's now only 450 Bitcoin a day available for sale by natural sellers. That's the miners. At this level, that works out to about $50 million of Bitcoin available for sale every day. If that $50 million is bought, then the price has got to move up to find any seller that's price sensitive. Now, if you do the math, you'll actually see the Bitcoin treasury companies by themselves are buying the entire natural supply.
Yeah.
BlackRock and the ETFs are buying another measure of that. And we've got nation state actors coming into the space. So I think when Bitcoin rallies, if it surges to 500,000 or $1 million, then maybe we could talk about it crashing down by $200,000 a coin. But at the current price levels, it only takes $50 million to turn the entire drive shaft of the crypto economy one turn. And you've got the Trump media organization announcing
Right.
$2.5 billion. You've got GameStop announcing 500 million. You've got my company that's raising billions and billions of dollars. So the writing is on the wall. Bitcoin's moving higher.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few people in the chat that have said what I think as well, which is that Saylor does have a vested interest in saying this. I think that is true, but I also, you can kind of tell that he actually genuinely believes this. I feel that from what he's saying. He does have a vested interest in saying this. It is part of the price is obviously due to people believing in the value of something. So, you know, he's instilling confidence so that the price will get bolstered, and you know that improves his credit quality, that improves their Bitcoin holdings, everything, right? So of course he's got a financial bias towards that, but he's also not wrong. Like, and he's just making a prediction, right? So does this play out correctly? Who knows? Who knows? He doesn't know either, but he's not wrong that there's huge, massive adoption coming into this space. That the natural sellers, as he puts it, the Bitcoin being mined, they're you know, that buying is happening beyond the natural sellers. He doesn't say beyond that you know, OGs are, you know, shaving off some of their stack and coming out at certain prices, and that's where we're seeing selling pressure, and that's natural in the market too. He doesn't go into that, but he is right that, you know, BlackRock's scooping up Bitcoin. He's scooping up Bitcoin every single day. There's a new Bitcoin treasury company in varying ranges of scale and size, but you know, I think there's still a few things that have to play out before there really is no crypto winter. But I still see that even with a crypto winter, it being muted because so many things have already played out that would make it more likely for a muted bear market or a crypto winter.
Well, think about it this way. You guys just like right off the top of your head here, do you guys feel at this point as if this thing is kind of hit a peak in terms of how many people and businesses and companies and governments are coming into this thing? Or do you feel like it's more like it's just really getting started? Like what side of that would you be on, peaking or starting?
I think starting. I think we're at the bottom.
We're 10 meters into a 100-meter dash.
Yeah.
If that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say 10 meters, to be honest. I think way less than 10% of the companies that are going to own Bitcoin actually own it already. Right? I think there's probably actually based
Do you think
on
in this cycle though, or just overall, of course, like in you know, in the grand scheme, but like if we're still thinking in 4-year cycles or something, do you think there's more going to happen between now and when we would traditionally have a bear market, that we're still only less than 10% there for the growth?
Sorry, go ahead, Rajat.
The way that companies are buying now, how do we I don't even know if we know that there's going to be a 4-year cycle anymore, because what if they just keep buying? And like I said in the past, right? Yeah. The cycles were determined by retail. So retail was only able to borrow, let's say, a limited amount of money. Today, Michael Saylor can borrow more money than probably all of retail could in the first decade of Bitcoin's existence, right? And then there's Michael Saylor, and then there's 1,000 other companies that can do the same thing. All of the S&P 500 can eventually own Bitcoin. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but maybe I'm being too bullish. But I think that it's possible that we don't see the 4-year cycles anymore.
My thoughts
Definitely.
exactly. Yep. I echo that because it's like, it's easy to say that. And I know we've heard that time and time again. This time is different. Everybody's tired of hearing that. But like legitimately, this time is different. Like we've kind of, if you compare this chart so far for the first couple of years here to what's happened in the past, it is much more like it feels like a coil that's just being suppressed right now. And it hasn't seen that explosion yet. And really, when you stop and think about it, like from a first principles standpoint here, like what causes the cycles? Rajat mentioned retail. There's always been some sort of big event that causes a huge drop. But then it seems like everybody kind of loses interest because it is retail, because they are very emotional, because they don't have the same level of conviction or legal requirements to hold that Bitcoin versus who's here today and who's actually holding the Bitcoin today. The treasuries and the corporations and the governments, they don't act with emotion. They're holding on to this asset for the next couple of decades, regardless of what the price does. So it's like you're not going to have those selling like we had before when there was a huge event like Mt. Gox or like China mining ban or FTX or whatever that is. But I just feel like, yeah, I mean, what even causes the cycle? And then you mix that with the supply, like the halving usually is kind of the Kickstarter to that. But like 96% of it has already been mined. So even the supply going forward is not that big of a factor anymore. It went from 50% to 25% to 12.5% to 6 and 12%. And it's just going to keep going down. So these cycles should become more muted simply because of the supply as well isn't going to change that much anymore.
One of the other main contributors of the cycle would be just global liquidity, which still has its cycling, but I don't know. We're like out of we're coming out of like a quantitative tightening cycle in the biggest economy, and we've already seen all the other economies already start easing. So maybe there will be a peak at some point where they have to tighten again, and that could create some sort of shock to Bitcoin's price because it is so correlated just with global liquidity. I don't think it's off the table quite yet, personally, but there's a lot of good evidence to say that it is. I'm not betting on that currently, personally, but yeah.
That's fair. We should give a shout out here. We got 450 people watching this show across our YouTube platforms alone, which is our all-time high. So a big shout out to everybody who's here, regardless if you're watching on Rajat's Forest channel, 88 Sats radio channel. I just shared the link there to our Maple Bitcoin channel. So we would appreciate if you guys have been enjoying what we're doing here. If you want to see more of it, very easy and free thing to do is just go over and subscribe to Maple Bitcoin and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any Friday live streams. So do you guys have anything else you want to touch on in terms of the cycles, the no more winters, $1 million? How should we wrap this?
I don't know if this is relevant, but people were talking about war in the comments there. And I just wanted to mention, even with a war, I don't think that can stop Bitcoin, right? If anything, Bitcoin's more powerful because there's all this uncertainty, because Bitcoin is the only thing that gives you certainty. Without Bitcoin, everything else is, you don't have any bearer assets. You have gold, but even gold, most of it is held by institutions. Most of it is held by ETFs, by central banks. Bitcoin is the only thing that the majority of it is actually held by retail. The majority of it is actually held by the people who need it, rather than just being held in a vault where it's not even being used like gold.
Could you imagine selling Bitcoin because there's a war in the Middle East? Like, that's the craziest thing to me. It's the most neutral, most bear instrument in the world that we've ever had, more so than gold. And that's what you decide to sell. I mean, people only sell that because they don't know what they have and because it's incredibly liquid and trading 24/7. And they're just looking to sell because they know that there's going to be a shock to the market, even if it's temporary, and they're traders and they're going to speculate and trade on that. But I couldn't imagine actually getting shaked out of a position in Bitcoin because of a war in the Middle East, which is unfortunately something we've been having for, I don't know, how far can you trace that back? Like centuries?
Yeah, centuries.
decades, centuries. Yeah, I mean it's been happening for a very long time. But yeah,
Yeah. And if anything, like what this person said, Cherry Beach, the comment that was highlighted there, people are selling because they don't understand it yet. So Bitcoin is acting like a risk asset because people think it's risky, because people don't understand it. They don't understand that it's a bearer asset that has no risk. So they're gambling with it. They're seeing that the price is very volatile. But what you see, like it's so important to look at the long-term trend rather than just the short term. In the short term, Bitcoin may be down $7,000 from the top, but in the long term, it's up $105,000 from zero. And the reason for that, it started at zero. It started at $0. The important thing here is just to keep stacking, right? You don't even have to worry about the short-term volatility. The volatility shouldn't matter. Somebody else mentioned before, or maybe it was a starred comment, can Bitcoin be manipulated? In the short term, yes, but in the long term, it can't. In the short term, even with, let's say, these war headlines that you see, we're not actually there. We don't know if it's actually happening the way that they report it. So technically, I mean, you don't know. What if that is a way to manipulate the market? So in the short term, it can be. FTX manipulated the market. They tried to keep Bitcoin below 20K, I think it was. But eventually, they couldn't manipulate it anymore, right? Once they lost their power to manipulate, once Bitcoin's price started exploding and people no longer wanted to hold it with them, it all just, they fell apart.
Mhm.
And Bitcoin
Certainly,
was more powerful than them, right? So
certainly
What?
the market can be manipulated of any
anything, yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
any good. And so Bitcoin's not immune to that. But the fundamental principles of like the code of Bitcoin and what Bitcoin actually is cannot be manipulated or is incredibly difficult to manipulate, I would say.
Yeah.
Making it the most secure cryptocurrency or ledger that we have.
What's the analogy that we used there before? The trying to keep a beach ball underwater. You can do it. You can do it, but you can't do it for very long. And that's exactly what it seems like happening. And every day that goes by, every week goes by where we're kind of just like going sideways here. And yes, I mean, even if you zoom out to a year ago, like we pretty much doubled in fiat price in a year. So it's not like we're hurting here, but it does seem like a very slow chop compared to what we think should be happening. But every day that goes by and that beach ball is held underwater, the higher it's going to shoot when it finally releases there. So it's inevitable, I think, barring something like that we can't foresee right now. But we can't live in a world where we're worried about things like that. You got to keep in your back of your mind, I guess. But like, it's seems inevitable at this point that we're going to that point. There was a comment here I wanted to touch on. It was about institutions. Somebody asked if institutions are going to be there. It is. So this is another part I think that we should talk a little bit about, because it's Bitcoin is absolute scarcity. They cannot create more Bitcoin no matter how much demand there is. And so they are going to be doing anything in their power to try to get this Bitcoin from the hands of people like us. Currently, individuals hold about 70% of the total supply of Bitcoin. Do you think the institutions are going to settle for that? Or do you think they're going to put up a bit of a fight and do some dirty moves to try to get that Bitcoin from our hands? Like, what do you guys think? How do you think this plays out, since these institutions, these countries, these central banks no longer have the ability to create more to enrich themselves? What's their game plan to get it from us?
It's the playbook of all Wall Street and all corporations. It's to be smarter than your opponent. It's to financially be agile and be aware of market conditions. And even I've talked about this a lot, but the lack of downward pressure when we do see a price movement to the downside, so lack of volatility, downward volatility, in my opinion, is because of institutions. They're seeing that downward price and they're buying the dip. They're algorithmically buying the dip constantly because they know what Bitcoin is. A lot of them do at this point. They know what Bitcoin is and they know it's going to be worth a lot more. It's programmed into it to be worth a lot more. And that has to come from somewhere, and it's coming from that 70%. It's coming from those individual holders. And I think, part of my motivation to make YouTube content is to encourage more individual users to start acquiring it. It's going to be hard for individuals to acquire it from institutions, because once it goes into strategy, that's a black hole. That's not coming back out, at least in the foreseeable future. But at least more individuals holding it decentralizes the wealth allocation of it, and then they'll be less incentivized to part with it. I mean, a OG Bitcoiner that has 1,000 Bitcoin, it's pretty easy for them to, sell a Bitcoin and upgrade their life, go on a trip, change their life drastically. To them, that's not huge, right? But if another individual was to acquire that one Bitcoin, they're going to be a lot more careful about selling that Bitcoin, right? They're going to maybe shave off, 0.1% of it, like that OG shaved off 0.1%, right? So that's kind of the way I think about it. But institutions are coming, institutions are here, and we have to acquire as much Bitcoin as we can as individuals. But
There was
no
another
stopping
comment from the same person. There was another comment there from Goss36TRS. I think majority of retail investors will sell it for a short-term game. Even then, they're going to be ahead, because let's say, for example, if they bought at the bottom and then they sold at the top, and they have some debt that they can pay off, right? They're still ahead. Just getting rid of that psychological effect that it has on your life, to have debt, to have credit card debt, to have a mortgage, all of that stuff. You constantly think about it. So even if they sold and they put that towards their debt, they're still better off, right? So Bitcoin, even if you sell, you're still better off in the grand scheme of things, because now you have your house. Let's say you paid off your mortgage with the Bitcoin that you bought. You now have a house, and you no longer have a mortgage, and that's because of Bitcoin. If it would have taken you 20 years to pay off your house otherwise, now it took you 3 years. So you saved 17 years of your life.
Yep. And that, I mean, both great points there. And that's what I was going to kind of piggyback off of Forrest's comments there. He's saying, like, the people who have held for a very long time now are now able to sell some of their Bitcoin, much less of what they would have had to if they spent it when they originally got it. But I think if you just play that over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's going to be the exact same for people who are holding Bitcoin today, in the sense that we are all going to be able to upgrade our lives by shaving off a much smaller percent of our stack. The longer we hold on to this asset, the more it's worth, and the less of it we have to actually exchange for the things that we do want in our life. So that's a pretty important aspect. And that's why, again, if you play this out long enough, I have no doubt that these sats are always going to be flowing around, because we're continuously, nobody really just wants to own as much Bitcoin as possible. You're basically just storing your time and energy in a much better battery than you would in anywhere else that you want to buy for things later. And the longer you wait, again, the less sats you're actually going to have to part with. So it's important. And I think that I posted a video today saying it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have today. If you don't have the conviction over why you have it and why it's so important to your family's future, then when it hits 200K, you're going to see it as 100% profit and cash out anyway. So you don't actually own that Bitcoin right now because you plan on trading it for fiat later. So I feel like there's a lot of people who actually hold Bitcoin today that don't have the conviction to make it through this institutional barrage that we're about to go through in the coming years here.
That's definitely true. I mean, there's going to be lots of reasons to get shaken out of your position, whether you feel you have conviction today or not. There's going to be, again, a war in the Middle East. There's going to be the price appreciation like crazy. You think, oh, this is a bubble speculation. I can buy back in. I'm going to sell. Then you forget about it for a while. And all of a sudden the price maybe dipped, but then it went back and even higher, right? And then you think, oh, well, maybe it's going to go down. You just wait. And you might get it back into a position, but it's not the same size of position you had before. So yeah, there's going to be lots of reasons, a lot of reasons to get shaken out. And another thing I'd like to say here is just that the goal of Bitcoin isn't to just buy Bitcoin and hold it forever. It's to buy it and hold it until it makes sense to use it, to spend it. And maybe that's right away. Maybe that's 5-10 years from now. And if it is 5-10 years from now, it's going to be worth a lot more. And you're going to be able to A, spend a lot less of it, and B, acquire much finer things in life. And that's great. We all benefit from adopting it as early as we are today.
Yes. That's the goal. Patrick's 21 Spiel Sats asked us, we're on 3 or 4 channels now live streaming. it's not really confusing. We have access to all the comments here from all 4 of those spots, so we see them all. But again, we do ask that over time here, most people shift towards our Maple Bitcoin channel so we can exclusively stream on there. So if you are watching this on Rajat's or Forrest or the 88 Sats radio channel, just be aware that there's going to be a day sometime in the future where we're no longer doing this. This is just kind of like the transition from our channels into Maple Bitcoin, trying to bring people there. And so we would appreciate if you kind of get ahead of that and help us make that full move where everybody's seeing all the comments, everybody's on the same stream. And the only way that we can really do that is by people going over to the channel and watching from the Maple Bitcoin channel. So kind of while we're taking a little break here, the QR code right beside Rajat's head there is the best way to support our channel. We have no sponsors. We never will have any sponsors. And so we are 100% community funded. So
can you just put a
shout
banner
outs
up
here? We
with
got
the link?
888 sats from. Oh, yes.
What just happened?
Banner.
What did happen?
Oh, there you
Did
go.
I cut out?
Yeah,
You're
the sound
chopping
cut
a
out.
little bit. Yeah.
Oh, because somebody actually emailed me that they said, how do I send Bitcoin to you guys if I'm watching this on a cell phone? Because they can't scan the code, right? So if you want to send sats, you can send it to that address there.
Maple Bitcoin at coinos.io. So Daniel here sent us Fat Zap 888 sats. Thank you, Daniel. Rajat and I both spent some time in Vegas with our good buddy Daniel there. We also had a zap of 50 sats anonymously, and 2,500 sats as well anonymously, but we know who that is. That is our good friend Clean Your Machine, the CYM zap 2,500 sats. So that's a good way to express your thanks, ask a question, leave a comment. You can send a zap and include a message with that zap, and we will read it on the show.
And leave a thumbs up. Really helps with spreading the show to more people. The more engagement this show gets, the more people see this content because YouTube pushes it out to more people, the more Bitcoin is adopted. Because I feel like people see this kind of content. I mean, if it was me personally, I wouldn't have bought Bitcoin if it weren't for YouTube content. So it doesn't cost you anything. Leave a thumbs up.
That's the goal here, is to get as many people onboarded to Bitcoin as possible. And the goal isn't to pump our bags. We're not going to have enough, stay here to pump Bitcoin, but we are going to help people, acquire some Bitcoin themselves and improve their life because of it, and store their value, store their time and energy in something that doesn't leak and doesn't contribute to negative things around the world, in my opinion, like the US dollar does.
100%. Very well said. And I think that that's so true. I think that most Bitcoiners are kind of on this page now, but I feel like some still aren't. The fiat world that we come from, it's a very dog-eat-dog world. Everybody's kind of trying to get ahead of each other. Whereas Bitcoin, it feels like everybody's on the same team. Everybody's working towards the same goal. Everybody's going in the same direction. And the more you can support each other, whether that's financially or just with likes and subscribes and things like that, the further we can get ahead. And we're only going to be on this earth for so long. And so there is some urgency here. As much as people, say that there's not, there is. We want to see this thing through. We want to spend as most time during our lives as possible in a Bitcoin world. And you guys are helping that. You guys and girls are supporting that. So thank you. And just keep that in mind going forward. But Rajat, would you how many sats would you charge somebody to speak at their birthday party about Bitcoin?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know. I haven't thought of it yet. I'll update my rates on my website. I'll get them out to you guys.
That's going to be like the new version of clowns at kids' birthdays parties. It's going to be Rajat.
Oh,
hire a
man.
Bitcoiner. Yeah, hire a Bitcoiner.
Rajat from Bitcoin. I'm just going to be dressed up as a Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly. Not a clown.
Yeah.
You would be the opposite of a clown in that situation. Okay, boys. Well, where do you guys want to go from here?
You go ahead, Rajat.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead for it. Go ahead for it.
Oh, sure. There was a comment by Crypto Boy talking about trying to use Coinbase and kind of getting stopped out by it. There's two sayings that in Bitcoin land, which is friends don't let friends use Coinbase, and friends don't let friends use ledgers. And it's tongue in cheek, and of course you can use either; they're fine. But Coinbase is really a crypto casino. There's many other better exchanges out there, Bitcoin only exchanges, plenty of them that aren't going to block you from buying Bitcoin. So that's just something I would consider doing, is moving away from Coinbase.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's actually a perfect example of that. If you just share my screen there, Jor, I saw this on Twitter. So somebody said Coinbase fraud had $240,000 of Bitcoin stolen yesterday on Coinbase. You can just read this, but
Brutal.
basically they had all this Bitcoin taken from them, and it was because they had it left on Coinbase. So my recommendation is, even if we go back to the comment about the credit card, so somebody was asking about the Coinbase credit card, the reward is based on from what I saw, how much Bitcoin you have on Coinbase. So the more Bitcoin you have on Coinbase, the bigger your reward will be. I would say that in that case, it's not worth it. I wouldn't risk any amount of Bitcoin to get a small reward. Because if you, whatever Bitcoin you put on there, let's say you put 1 Bitcoin on there, they give you, or let's say you put 0.1 Bitcoin on there, and that's what the reward threshold is for 4%. You're going to get back your Bitcoin in 25 years. So if they take it at any point and you're expecting 4% rewards, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot I didn't even read this one, but a lot of it is phishing scams where because there's data leaks, and they know you have a bit of Bitcoin on your Coinbase account, and then they get you basically to give your seed phrase up to them, pretending that they're customer service and having a lot of information on you because of those data leaks. And this can happen to very intelligent, very orange pilled Bitcoiners. They can be tricked by this. There's stories of that happening. So that can't really happen if you take it into self-custody, if you know what you're doing, if you understand that you never give anyone your seed phrase, no matter what. You never put that online. You never show that to a camera. You never tell anybody it, ever. There's no reason anyone would ever need to have your seed phrase, ever.
Yeah, it's a secret. Keep it a secret. Don't let anybody have it, because if somebody has it, it's having that seed phrase, having those 12 or 24 words is the same as having Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's the ownership of the Bitcoin, is the private key, which allows you to move the Bitcoin. That's what you own when you own Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that Ledger question that people are mentioning here. Somebody said you mentioned Ledger along with Coinbase. Can you elaborate? Why do we tell people not to buy Ledger?
Okay, so Ledger has a lot of their code is closed source. They hold, I think, roughly around like 70% of the cold storage crypto out there. So they're a huge part of the market share.
Wow.
So with that being said, they've done an extremely good job of doing that. Like, people haven't necessarily lost their crypto because of using Ledger. And they've been trusted for a long time. So people continue to do it. And it's kind of the first thing you hear about when you get into this space. But with that, right, closed source code means that only the team at Ledger has audited it. And if there's any backdoors for Ledger, they're the only ones that know about it. If there's any backdoors for hackers out there, hopefully no other hackers know that, and maybe Ledger doesn't even know that because they only have their own coders looking at it. So with other hardware wallets out there, even as simple as something like a Trezor, which I would say is like the one step away from Ledger and probably very common, people know about it, but you can go down the line. You could go to something Bitcoin only, like a Jade, a Passport, a Cold Card. All of those are open source, and their code is visible. You can go in and audit their code yourself if you know how to, or you can rely and trust on other people that have looked through that code, and they know and have looked and seen that there's no backdoors, no vulnerabilities. So that is why you want to move away. You want to move away from anything closed source at all within this space, in my opinion, because it has the potential for vulnerabilities.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, what do you think the possibility is that a company like Trezor, I don't know, this may be just completely ridiculous, but I'm sure somebody's thinking this. What do you think the possibility is that maybe Ledger preloads private keys on their wallets, and then they know the keys that you have?
I don't think Ledger does that, but it's entirely possible a hardware wallet company could do that 100%. If they're closed source, that's
If they're closed source.
entirely possible. I don't think Ledger's a bad actor. I just think they have their own reasons for doing this. And I just think it's not a good look to be not transparent in this space. The other thing they did have a couple years ago is they also had this option where you could have them as a support agent, and they would be able to remote access your keys if you lost them. So they did have some ability to add a backdoor into your hardware wallet. This was into your hardware wallet. And they said, okay, well, that's not in any of them. That's an opt-in service, but that freaked out a ton of people at the time. And I think deservingly so, because if that backdoor is possible, then what's, you know, again, you have to trust them that isn't on by default on every single one of their hardware wallets, that is something you have to opt in to, and you can't verify it if it is or isn't. So again, a little bit scary, a little bit risky. Not saying that, like, if you have your Bitcoin on a ledger, you're probably fine, but it's not. People get them oftentimes because they're cheaper or because they don't know any better. And, you know, I think that's not really good reason to keep your Bitcoin on there. I think you spend a little more, you get an open source hardware wallet that's preferably Bitcoin only, because there's potentially other vulnerabilities to, you know, to have the ability to put these other cryptos on there. You know, there's other code they have to add to the hardware wallet, which potentially could have vulnerabilities too, right? So again, just, you know, something to think about, really.
Yeah, I think that there's a question here. I thought Trezor was open source. So
Trezor is.
I think Forrest nailed it there. He said something along the lines of Ledger's fine. But I think when you're dealing with the greatest asset that has ever existed in human history before, you don't really want to just settle for fine. And it's not like the Ledger costs $100 and a cold card is $20,000. Like there's not a huge spread here, and you're getting way more security. You have an open source device that you can see, and the cold card itself has so many more features. You don't have to do it, but they're hidden behind advanced features. But as you continue with your Bitcoin journey, you can add some of these things in there, like a trick pin, like a duress pin. There's a way to teleport your private keys if you're setting up a multi-sig. Cold card is the best. And when you're talking about the best asset that is Bitcoin, you should be making an investment in the best. And I think the other thing too with the Ledger is that they have pushed through a couple updates because they're closed source. There's no ability to verify this. But I think an important lesson here, regardless of whatever you're using, a device, a software, an application, a Chrome desktop extension, never have your auto updates on. Because if there is a bad actor who puts a bug or something into one of these updates and you have it run automatically, you're screwed. Yeah. So my best practice in that sense is I never update anything for like a week or two, because if there's something wrong with the software update or a bug or something goes wrong there, you're not going to be the one who's impacted by that. There's obviously going to be a huge amount of people talking about it. You're going to be able to avoid that. So it's just best practice, I think, with Bitcoin and with anything online, is to never have automatic updates on anything. It's just you're going to get burned at some point. Could be your Bitcoin, it could be your information, but you're going to get burned.
A couple of little things I want to address here real quick. The Unknown Disciple, Cold Card isn't open source anymore. It's not free and open source, which means you can't just download their code and create your own hardware wallet from it. It is open. It is verifiably open source. So you can verify the code. You just can't use it you need permission to use it, basically, if you were to make an offshoot of it. And then MHMA said Cold Card is too difficult. Then I would do one step lower, which would be the Jade. If you really, really believe that, I would say the Jade is a beginner intermediate and with less features, but a little bit more user-friendly. But again, the Cold Card is really not that difficult. I would just spend an hour or two watching some videos, tutorials, doing the steps. You could figure it out, or, you know, work with a coach like any one of us to help you with your first transaction and setting up your Cold Card.
Yeah, and this actually happened to me. I had a Ledger on the front seat, and somebody broke into my car and they left 4 more.
That's hilarious.
Oops, sorry, Rajat. I took that off there by accident.
That's okay.
That's good material there, buddy. That's great material. Yeah, it's just like, why risk it? You know, there has been past issues with Ledger. Nobody can deny that. This is objective facts we're talking about here. There's been leaks with data information. There's been a whole ton of things go wrong in Ledger. So it's like, why even bother? And Forrest said this a couple times, but whether it's a hardware device, an exchange, anything, it should always be Bitcoin only.
Yep.
That's it.
I think you were, Jor, I think you were mentioning the Tangem wallet at one point in one of your videos.
Yeah.
What was wrong with that one? I actually don't know. I just, so the way that I do it is I'm not that great with the security stuff. I'm not like an expert on that. So I kind of, I would say I almost outsource the knowledge because just based on the knowledge that I have, Cold Card is probably the best. I've gotten it from a lot of people who have been studying for this thing for a while. So what do you guys think about the Cold Card? Why do you guys not like that?
You mean the Tangem? The Tangem.
Tangem.
I actually
the
actually
Tangem,
have
not
one. I
okay.
have firsthand experience with using it, so I
okay.
can talk a little bit on it. People like it because of how convenient it is. You download an app and you just tap your card on it, and then you have 2 cards or 3 cards, and they all sync up to have the same seed phrase inside of them. But it's not visible ever. And if it is visible, then it becomes a hot wallet. So you can generate a seed phrase with it, but you generate it by connecting your card to the software app, and then the app generates or reads the seed phrase and spits it out to you on an internet connected device, which is your phone. And if you generate your seed phrase with the Tangem, it's the same thing as using an Aqua wallet or a Moon wallet or a Coinos, or not even a Coinos wallet. It's the same thing as just using like a Sparrow wallet, Electrum, any of those things. It's a soft wallet. It's a hot wallet at that point if you generate your own seed phrase. So the way to use a Tangem, if you were to use one, is to not generate a seed phrase, and then you have these multiple cards, like you have a couple of these, and then if you lose one, you're not screwed because you have another one, and then you tap these, and these are actually signers for you. But again, it's such a limitation, and it's just not really, it's not a really good solution in my opinion.
It's not Bitcoin only.
That too, 100%.
It's closed source.
People get these specifically because they have a lot of different cryptos on them.
Yeah.
It's for like shitcoining.
So would you go with Ledger or Tangem? Well, like if you had to go with something.
Neither. Personally, honestly, I would rather have my Bitcoin on an exchange than either of those two.
Ooh.
Honestly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Except Coinbase.
Is it closed source? Are you sure that it's closed source?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay. I was just looking that up.
I mean, double check me there, but I'm 99% sure it is.
Okay.
King Peasant said, sorry, Forrest, what were you saying?
Oh, that's another reason to avoid it then if it is closed source.
Oh, okay.
Just double check that though, Forrest. King Peasant says you guys need a Cold Card sponsorship. So I think Forrest might have one as well, or working towards one, but I do have a referral link for CoinKite. So you can use that link that I just shared in the chat there, and that'll give you 5% off of your purchase. And if you're into this, if you're kind of buying what we're putting down here, there's an MK4, which was the original, not the original, but the OG, I guess. There was MK2, MK3, MK4. And then there's a Cold Card Q now. Both of them are very similar. They're pretty much carbon copies of each other. The Cold Card Q just has a bigger screen. It has a nicer keyboard to type on, and it actually has, it's battery powered. So you don't have to plug it into the wall and be like a foot away from the wall like you do with an MK4. So personally, I prefer the Cold Card Q. I love that thing. That's kind of my main driver as my hardware device is a Cold Card Q, but I also love the MK4. The Q is a little bit more expensive, but I do think it's worth it there. So that's what I would say to that.
Would you guys use the Ledger for a multi-sig setup?
I would feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah, because there isn't a single vulnerability with that. If you have a 2 of 3, right? There's just the smallest multi-sig you'd want to set up. Yeah. And just to have the multi-vendor, it's definitely an option. Again, maybe pay an extra $50 and just get a Trezor instead. If they're even more expensive, they might even just be the same price at this point.
Yeah, Trezor's pretty cheap now. Trezor's like
cheap.
$60, $70. I'm looking at it now.
Trezor is honestly a solid option. It is. The only thing that I have against Trezor is I just don't like plugging things into my laptop. That's it. It might sound stupid, but at the same time, it's like you have your family's generational wealth for the next 1,000 years that you're storing on this thing. you should be generating that offline, and it should never touch the internet anywhere.
Yeah. So
if you're plugging things into your laptop that's been to Amazon and to probably some adult sites, some porn sites, like it's a recipe for disaster. You're just waiting to be screwed over. Like, why? I that's what I just don't understand with people, is like, maybe they just don't know any better, but at the same time, it just blows my mind. What do you guys think about this? I'll maybe share mine. I like the cold card Q #1, and then MK4 shortly behind that, but they're both cold cards. Number 2 is the Foundation Passport, and number 3 would be the Blockstream Jade. Those are the 3 that I've tried that I've liked. They're all air gap. You never touch the internet, but I think you guys have had some success with other ones as well, right?
I've never used the Foundation, but I don't really like them that much, just because they're the reason that the cold cards are not free and open source. They actually, I believe they copied the software and just created their own wallet off of that, which is fine, I guess. But I'm sure they're a good option still, but I've just never used them. Yeah, same cold card Q, Passport, or sorry, no, the Jade Plus is a really great option in my opinion as well. And a little update on this too, the Tangem. The app is open source. The firmware or the card itself is not. It's closed source, and that has the secure element chip that generates your passphrase in there. So if there's a vulnerability, only Tangem knows about it, or maybe they don't even know about it, and maybe some hacker could find it. So not a great way to store your keys.
Red Rider BB Gun says copied it and made a better product than the cold card. Wow, that's a bold statement.
Maybe that's true. I don't know.
You know, Red Rider, I'm not going to lie. Like, the Foundation is super easy to set up. It's pretty visually appealing. I love the cold card Q though. It won't beat that. But like the Foundation Passport, it looks like an old cell phone, like one of those brick phones that you could play like Snake on. Like, it looks like that. It's a really clean product. Obviously, it's all open source. It's a carbon copy of cold card. It's a good option. But again, I would lean towards the Q there personally. Good chat there, though, boys.
BlackBerry. You know those old Blackberries, the BlackBerry Pearl?
Yeah.
It looks like one of those.
The Q?
No, the Foundation.
Yeah.
The Q looks like a BlackBerry Bold.
Yes. All good options, though. Anytime you're using something that's open source, Bitcoin only, and has the ability to air gap, that's what you want. Yep. And as Rajat said there, if you are somebody who has like a Trezor or a Ledger right now, and you maybe want to upgrade to a cold card, that's good. Don't throw out your Ledger, because you can actually use that in a multi-sig that doesn't have as much reliance on the single point of failure there. Even if you had a Ledger as part of a multi-sig and Ledger got hacked, you're unaffected by it, because that's only one key out of your 3, and they can't do anything with that Bitcoin. So don't throw out your Ledger, or, throw it into Rajat's car if his window's still open, if you want to. But you can actually add that into a multi-sig, which is kind of cool. Then you just need one more to make a multi-sig. Bitcoin Nurse here sharing a QR code. If anybody's looking for a Foundation Passport there, you get $10 off. So there you go. That's what I would recommend. Kind of look into the cold card Q. That's our recommendation. Other people like the Passport, the Jade. There's also a Bitbox that people like. Mm-hmm. Do your own research in these 3 things. But again, pay attention to Bitcoin only, open source. And what was the third one? Air gapped.
Air gapped ability.
Well, I want to ask you, can you use any wallet other than Tangem with Superbacked?
You could use any wallet, actually.
Any wallet.
Although maybe not with Tangem, because the private key's there, but yeah. Right. And Superbacked, the nice thing about Superbacked is, like, it's not specific to Bitcoin. So you can put your recovery phrase in there. You can put your PIN code, your passphrase, your online banking information, the unlock to your phone, anything that you would want to pass on to your family if something were unexpectedly happen to you. You can put it all in this text box, and you encrypt that, and you can geographically disperse that. So it's not limited to Bitcoin. It's pretty much all of your digital assets, essentially, you can store with Superbacked.
You could do Tangem as well, but it would be like using a software wallet and then using Superbacked, which would just make no sense at all.
Oh,
yeah.
Right, because it's still connected to the internet, I guess, in that way, because it acts like a hot wallet, right?
Yeah, yeah. It acts as a hot wallet.
Is open source bad? No. Open source is
good.
it's the goal for everything. That's the world that we want to move towards, where you can verify things and not get burned by bad actors. Closed source is bad. Okay. Any other topics you guys want to discuss before we jump into some Q&A stuff? Again, if you do have any questions here, you can just put them in caps and we will try to address them. Do you guys have any more discussion points?
No, I'm
No.
good. I like the question that the comment that you highlighted from Rich BC, deposited a check.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I just want to quickly talk about something here because we just had a very fat zap come through the airwaves here. So let me get through these ones quickly. Again, there's a QR code right beside Rajat's head there. If you do like supporting the channel here, you can do it, or on Zapstream. We got some zaps over from the Zapstream too. But somebody sent in 1,000 sats and said, run knots. We'll second that. We got 50 sats from Mert. Thank you, Mert. And 500 sats from Mert as well, back to back. Jax, thank you, Mert. 1,217 sats from Stan in Nigeria.
Oh,
Shout out to Rajat and the team.
Nice.
That is awesome. The next one here, we got 5,251 sats sent in anonymously. 1,000 sats anonymously. And a big one here, a fatty for Fat Zap Friday today. 50,000 sats.
wow.
Whoa.
Anonymously too. So God bless you, whoever sent that in. Hopefully you can let us know in the comments if it was you, or if you want to remain anonymous, that's okay too. But wow, 50,000 sats. That might be our biggest zap on the show in history.
Oh, you're muted, Rajat.
Oh, I think we got one for 100, didn't we?
100,000? Oh yeah, maybe.
I think we got one.
Yeah, you're right. I think BitBilly sent in 100,000. That's right. And then we got one more for 500 anonymously. And then we actually got a couple on the Zap stream today. So the boys are, the sats are flowing into the Maple Bitcoin stream here. 1,000 sats, 69 sats, 1,000 and 100 from our good friends over on the Zap stream there.
Nice.
So thank you, everybody. Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
That is something else. Okay, so which one did you want to talk about here, Rajat?
Rich BC.
Deposited a check. I think that one's pretty easy from Rich BC.
There she
Deposited a check at the bank. The money won't clear for 7 consecutive business days. I can't move my own money for 9 days. This is why we use Bitcoin. Absolutely.
The fiat rails are insane. I tried to buy MetaPlanet through a broker, and it took me about 2 weeks to actually get the money from my bank into my brokerage account. It's just, these things are so slow, like so slow and unreliable. And that's not even probably even final settlement either. Like when people use their credit cards, their debit cards, they think it's final settlement. These are just accounting ledgers that end up being final settlement in like a month. Like it takes like a month to settle, which is what you should actually be comparing Bitcoin to. And even then it's not even a good comparison because they're settling in fiat, which is just backed by belief. But yeah, it's just, yeah, people complain about, 10-minute blocks to get a transaction through in Bitcoin. It's like, that is final settlement of an infinitely, or like a finite asset. And, it's verified by 20,000 other nodes around the network. It's just like, it's so hard to comprehend what Bitcoin is when you have this failed system that we use every day to compare it to.
It's so crazy. And the thing is, we never really had a choice, right? Like up until Bitcoin, it could have been even worse than we have today. And we would have no idea what a better system looks like. And that's why, to me, it's like people get so concerned with, is this thing a medium of exchange or is this thing a store of value? And it's like, it's both, and it's the best of both. And that alone shows you the value of this currency and of this network. And that's why it's going to win. That's why it cannot be stopped. And that's why the price of this thing and purchasing power will continue to go up forever because of that. It's It's a far superior system to both medium of exchange and a store of value, and eventually will become a unit of account for the world and beyond. What if we have aliens with a different Bitcoin? What then?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually, I heard a conversation talking about how there would have to be a different Bitcoin on Mars because the way to communicate and transmit to all the nodes, like the information of finding a block, would take too long, and there would be an advantage to running a node on Earth compared to, or running a miner on Earth compared to running a miner on Mars, and there's just like a delay because of the actual physical space of transferring data, right? So it would actually make sense to have like Mars Bitcoin. then
It's
then
so
there
crazy
would
that
be
people actually think about this stuff.
yeah, it's pretty
It's
crazy.
so cool.
It's crazy. It's cool, but it's like there's a legitimate chance that people are living on Mars within our lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I mean, that's a good conversation there, I think, in terms of helping people understand this. Don't ever limit Bitcoin to like one thing or the other. It's everything. It's the best of everything. What else do we have here, folks? I saw another good one that I want to get to. Oh, here's one. I want to talk about this one from Minja. Could one set ever equal $2? Yes. I shared a video on my channel the other day saying that in 21 years from now, when Bitcoin hits $100 million, this is at a 40% compound annual growth rate. So it'll take 21 years for one sat to equal $1. And there was a comment saying like, why didn't you say Bitcoin was going to be worth $1,000 or $10,000 million, like trying to be a smartass? And I'm like, well, over a long enough time frame, it will be. That's what people miss here is like, it's absolutely scarce. Everything, all productivity, all of our imagination will forever flow into these scarce units.
Yeah. Like even in the past, at one point, the S&P 500, the index was at, I'm just looking at the chart, it was at $748 in 1996. Who would have said back then that, oh, the S&P 500 is going to be approaching 6,000?
Right.
Exactly.
It would seem crazy. Yeah.
It was crazy.
It would seem
But
crazy.
it's going to keep going. It's exactly the same thing with Bitcoin. Like you're going to see like right now, it's what, 10 Satoshis per cent? Is that what it is? So 1 cent will buy you 10 Satoshis. Then 1 cent will buy you 1 Satoshi. Then 1 Satoshi will buy you 10 cents. And it'll keep just rising in that way. Once we hit $1 million per coin, $2 million is right around the corner. Then $3 million is right around the corner. Then $10 million. It's going to keep going up and up and up because there's a finite supply of Bitcoin, and $1 per or $2 per sat is actually, you're still early at $2 per sat because somebody's willing to accept fiat for their Bitcoin. So you're still early even at $2 per sat.
Yeah. I mean, the argument that I have against this is that at that point, who is willing to even use fiat at all? Like, why is fiat even have a purpose at this point? Because it's so worth less, and Bitcoin should be fully understood at that point by the vast majority of people that they don't fall for like fiat is a trick, right? Fiat is a trick.
Yep.
They're saying something is worth something when it's not.
Yep.
And people believe it, and everybody is delusional and being tricked by each other for accepting this fiat value. And it's not worth what it actually is. People think it's worth. So I think at that point, maybe, I mean, I know people are pretty dense. Like I hammer it in like to all my friends. I talk about Bitcoin all the time and they still aren't buying it. And it's like, but maybe when, Bitcoin's when sat is worth $1, I mean, it's pretty hard to deny it then. I just feel like you can't be that stupid to still think that fiat has value at that point.
But if you think about it this way, like it's the same conversation to me is like not so much about the fiat price, but like let's say that most people still value fiat enough for it to be worth something. That's still the world that we're living in, right? People work for dollars, they spend their dollars, they buy things with those dollars, and other people are still willing to accept those. That day will change. I think it'll actually happen much faster than people think. But at the same time, focus on the purchasing power of things, right? So what are those sats actually going to be worth? Whether it's in the fiat dollars, that's just how our mind comprehends things today. But like if you take every house, every acre of land, every vehicle, every golf club, everything that exists on Earth, and you divide that by 21 million, that's what those sats are going to be worth, regardless of what the fiat price is. how much is one of those sats going to buy you? And I think our mind just correlates what we see in terms of fiat values today. That's how people kind of tie it in there. So I agree that fiat's going to disappear soon, but people are still going to be able to buy things with sats. And that's kind of how we're going to be measuring it. And that's kind of when it becomes the unit of account for the world, right?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing for me is that when Bitcoin hits $1 million, one sat equals 1 cent. So it could happen this year at a 40% compound return. It's going to happen in 6 years from now. But at that point, just put yourself there where 1 sat equals 1 cent. And that's the ticker. You go onto your CoinGecko, it says 1 sat, 1 cent. And then it goes up to 2 cents for 1 sat. And behind the scenes there, do you know what just happened? Bitcoin went from $1 million to $2 million. When 1 sat went from 1 cent to 2 cents, Bitcoin went from $1 million to $2 million. And that's when this thing reaches escape velocity, I think, is at $1 million, simply for that reason. When we start valuing things, or we start measuring the fiat price in sats versus Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Crazy to think about. And then 1 sat equals 1 sat equals, what am I saying here?
5 cents. 5 cents.
5 cents. That's going to be $5 million Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it's going to trade like a stock, like a penny stock, like 1 cent to 2 cents today, and then down to 1 cent. And that's going to be $1 million in the background of Bitcoin's price going up and down.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty hard to wrap our heads around at this point, but it'll happen, and it'll make sense then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's going to be so obvious when it happens, but now it just seems like so far-fetched. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this one from Oasis. Do you guys think the Bitcoin ETF is also a good investment after? That's the key there, I think, after direct Bitcoin.
I think it's good to diversify into, because if you have, so let's say you have all of your Bitcoin in cold storage and something happens, you lose everything, right? But let's say, for example, if you have 10% in the ETFs and you have 10% on an exchange, and then you have 10% in some kind of multi-sig, and then you have 70% in cold storage where you have the keys. Based on where we think Bitcoin is going, that 10% that you have in the ETFs is going to be worth significantly more than what it's worth today. Even your 70% that you have, it's going to be worth way more than what's worth today. So if you can put a little bit into these other vehicles, I think that's not a problem. But I mean, I personally would avoid it if possible. There's no real reason to have the ETFs other than diversification, because if you think about it, you're underperforming against Bitcoin because you have to pay the transaction or the management fees. Then you have to make sure that you can actually access the Bitcoin when you need it. You have to make sure that the exchange will actually, or the brokerage will actually give it to you. And it's possible that they don't, right? So let's say World War III breaks out and you have your Bitcoin on BlackRock. If World War III breaks out and the internet stops working, electricity stops working, how are you going to get access to your Bitcoin? You can't. It's gone. But if you have it in cold storage, let's say you don't have internet access, you don't have electricity, you can go to another place where they do have access to the internet and electricity, and you can rehypothecate your Bitcoin there. You can not rehypothecate, but you can get access to your Bitcoin and recover your Bitcoin. Yeah, that's the word. You can recover your Bitcoin there, but you can't do that with the ETFs.
Yeah, you're relying on a lot of third parties, but the diversification that you talked about is custodial diversification. So there is an argument to be made to diversify, maybe have some in a hot wallet, cold wallet, lightning wallet, multi-sig, ETF, third-party custodian partnership thing. But the downside, I think Rajat hit the downsides pretty good. You're trusting a lot of third parties with an ETF. There are a couple upsides to an ETF, which is one, being able to have margin against it, being able to have really low rate loans on an ETF. And the other is that it's,
tax advantage, maybe.
That's it. I was going to say, yeah. So in Canada, you could hold it in a TFSA. You could sell that and not have capital gains. If you were going to go, say, buy a house or something else, upgrade your lifestyle in some way, you could preemptively, you could think ahead and do that with an ETF instead of cold storage, which if you're thinking in a shorter medium term time is going to be affected by capital gains treatment, whereas an ETF might have better tax treatment potentially. So those are
Yes.
two advantages.
Yeah, and I actually had a conversation with a guy about a month ago now who was he was planning a big family vacation at the end of this year, and so he was asking me if he should put it into Bitcoin or into something else like strategy or Bitcoin ETF. And I said, if you subscribe to the theory that in December of 2025 the Bitcoin price is going to be worth more than it is in June 2025, which I think all three of us do. It could be $1 million, it could be even 200,000. But the point is if you have this money earmarked for a new car, a down payment on a house, a trip, you can put that into a tax-free account right now and let that sit there for the next 6 months. And you can pull that thing out, no problem, no tax consequences or anything like that. And so you just turned your family vacation maybe from 20K to 40K or 60K using something like this, where you don't have to worry about declaring it as a capital gain or paying taxes on that. You can use the things that we have available here in Canada, something similar in the US as well. But there are risks to that, right? There's a lot of risks involved. You guys did a very good job of covering those. The other thing I would say, though, is that if you had to leave the country, let's say that Justin Trudeau takes over Canada again. I mean, Mark Carney's not too much of a better alternative, but let's say that we wanted to leave. We're fed up with Canada. We're scared. We want to leave. If we leave Canada with our Bitcoin in a registered account in like a Bitcoin ETF, that's a disposal for us. You dispose of your assets when you leave the country, when you go somewhere else. You have to dispose of your assets. And the crazy thing is it's very similar to like an unrealized gain on it, because even though you don't sell the shares, you still have to come up with the money to pay the taxes on that disposal from you leaving the country, if you can even access those funds and get a bank account somewhere else, things like that. With Bitcoin, you take your 12 words, you hop on an airplane, and you still have that asset when you land.
That's a great point. Another positive of an ETF that I forgot to mention, because I seem to be talking about the positives on for some reason. Some Gabe mentioned it in the comment section. You can sell covered calls on ETFs if that's something you're into, to generate some sort of yield off of. You are putting that ETF and that Bitcoin price allocation at risk when you do that. But even Some Gabe talked about selling 10 delta calls, which is pretty far out of the money, pretty low risk. You do it timing right. I mean, I've done it a lot with Bitcoin ETFs, to be honest, and use it to lower your cost basis and generate some cash flow, that kind of stuff. So another slight advantage potentially.
Reason Matter says, I don't think fiat will go away. There will be two systems, people who stay in the fiat system and those in the Bitcoin system. I agree. I think that you have to clarify, though, and I know we've talked about this a couple different times on Maple Bitcoin and some of the discussions we've had, but there is a big difference between a fiat dollar and just like a normal dollar, right? So if the US came out and said, you know what, we're going away from the Federal Reserve, we're going away from fiat, because these bills here, every dollar in the US, it says Federal Reserve note. That's what it says at the top. That's all these things are. They're from the Federal Reserve, not the government. And so this is fiat. This is made out of nothing and backed by nothing. But if there was a currency, as Reason Matters is talking about here, there are going to be different currencies that come out. Countries are going to buy Bitcoin. They're going to issue their own currencies. They're going to be backed by their Bitcoin holdings. Countries are going to do this. I bet MicroStrategy will have their own version of the MicroStrategy dollar one day. These are the layers that are going to be stacked on top of Bitcoin. But it all comes back to the layer one network of Bitcoin and how solid that is. That's the only way that this whole thing's going to work. Do you guys have thoughts on that at all?
I kind of have a thought that you're like, say there is fiat or other currencies that are backed by something like Bitcoin or some other kind of commodities. They should have like a risk premium on them where they're actually worth less than their underlying, which would be kind of hard to build and use structurally, because it wouldn't make sense for the people to put up the actual commodity behind them if the paper's not worth as much, because you're taking on additional risk, which is not really the way that it's been built in the past, but kind of the way that I see it as a Bitcoiner. It
would be the free market, though, right? Like if Japan's currency that they issue is backed by gold and Ukraine's currency that they issue is backed by Bitcoin, and you can go to Ukraine's website and see how much Bitcoin they hold, which is back in their currency, more people are going to want to hold that. So that will be the discount or premium placed on other currencies. It's all going to be based on how much Bitcoin they have.
Yeah. It's an interesting potential future that we have of being able to trade these instruments.
Isn't that similar to what Safe was saying about Safety Moose was saying about Tether, where they're gonna have so much
Mhm.
Bitcoin and the USDT that they issue will basically be like Bitcoin plus US dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's a basically additional collateral on USDT because they back it with Bitcoin and not just treasury bills. Yeah, so they're even safer basically, potentially depending on how much. There's still a lot of trust, I would say, with something like USDT, but
Yeah.
Tether has 100,000 Bitcoin.
yeah,
Wow.
They have 100,000 Bitcoin. They have a ton of US Treasury, and they have some gold as well. So if you're looking at holding a currency, would you rather store it in US dollars, which is literally backed by nothing? Or would you rather hold it in USDT, which is a combination of that nothing plus Bitcoin plus gold? Like that's why it should trade at a premium. I subscribe to that theory as well.
yeah, I kind of see that. But again, you still there's the trusting of a corporation at that point.
Yes.
I don't know. None of these things sound compelling to me, but that's because I'm a Bitcoiner through and through, and I just would hold Bitcoin. I don't want Ukraine's Bitcoin dollar. I don't want Japan's gold backed dollar. I just want Bitcoin. And because it is its own monetary network, you can just do that. You don't need the payment rails of fiat currency payment rails that have been established. As we've already discussed, they're incredibly inefficient. 7 days to do a bank transfer. It's just, you could do a peer-to-peer channel payment that happens instantaneously that is backed by Bitcoin in a lightning transaction, or you can do an on-chain final settlement action and it takes 10 minutes. So I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to even use the monetary network of any other currency at this point.
Right. Agree.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got to share this quickly here because this website sucks a ton of my broadband. So somebody asked how much Bitcoin is left. You can actually go to a website here. There's a ton of these different resources actually that are available. But one of them is time chain calendar here. So you can see up at the top here, we're in the 5th epoch. You can see the block subsidy, and you can see the total supply of Bitcoin today is 19.87 million. So there has been 94.65% of Bitcoin mined. And over the next 115 years, the last 5.35% are going to be mined.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. That's a cool website. Time chain calendar.
It's got all the info you need on there. Yes.
And you can go back in history and look at other points of time with it. Yeah. Cool.
But the real amount of Bitcoin is actually lower than that, because if you think about it, all these like let's say Marathon, they started borrowing money to buy Bitcoin.
Mhm.
So they're bringing their future consumption to the present. They're probably not going to have to sell that Bitcoin that they get in the future.
Potentially. Yeah.
Right? They could, because they borrowed money to buy Bitcoin. The Bitcoin that they have is going to appreciate so much, so they can potentially sell maybe even a fraction of what they get as rewards in the future. So if Marathon gets, let's say, even 1% of that, that's 1% gone. Then if Riot gets another 1% of that, that's another 1% gone. There's going to be other institutions that do this.
Mhm.
And I think it'll only happen until the US dollar is dead, because technically you can just, back to that question that was asked before, will Bitcoin replace the fiat currency system? The only reason why fiat even has value is because people are willing to hold fiat. They're willing to accept fiat for their goods and services, for their time. At some point, I mean, I don't know when that's going to happen. That could take 50 years. It could take 100 years for all we know. But at some point, nobody's going to want fiat.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what governments tell you. If you don't want fiat, and as soon as you get it, if you get rid of it right away, that's going to add to inflation. So it's just going to make the fiat currency system is just going to get worse and worse. Even if people do want it, even if it still does have value, the value will keep decreasing. It'll keep being absorbed by Bitcoin until at some point, let's say Bitcoin's worth 2 trillion, and the rest of the assets in the world are worth 2 trillion. So it's 50% of the value.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually it'll be 75% of the value. Then it'll be 90%. It'll keep rising because everything else trends to zero against Bitcoin, even the housing market. So the housing market's worth what? 300 trillion today. At some point, it'll be worth 400 trillion, then 500 trillion. Today, Bitcoin's only worth 2 trillion. But in comparison to the housing market, it's only 0.6%. At some point, when real estate goes to, let's say, 400 trillion, maybe Bitcoin's going to be at 8 trillion. So now you have a higher percentage. So over time, that's going to keep rising and rising and rising until Bitcoin is the majority of assets. And again, that's we go back to the fiat currency issue, where with fiat you can bring your future consumption to the present. You can take as much Bitcoin as you want to. So if we go back to that graphic that Jor was showing there, it shows that you have 1.13 million Bitcoin coming out over the next 115 years. But the reality is that maybe only 100K of that actually hits the market.
If that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if that. Yeah,
I think because if you look at who's producing the Bitcoin, like for the next 140 years, is Bitcoin mining companies, right? That's what see Rajat. It's Bitcoin Bitcoin mining companies. And my opinion there is like the companies who have been paying attention here for a while know what's going on. And so therefore, I think that there's been a lot of backroom deals already happening, and it's going to amplify. I think the governments are going to start taking over some of these Bitcoin mining companies, and the BlackRocks of the world, if they have control of these mining companies, they're just going to say, hey, don't even think about putting those Bitcoin on the market. Those are ours. Because not only is there hardly any Bitcoin in circulation right now, but those are clean Bitcoin. And I don't know how important that's going to be in the future, clean versus dirty Bitcoin. I don't know. But people will definitely be willing to pay a premium for it. And we will see states and countries and governments and powerful corporations start absorbing some of these Bitcoin mining companies just to gain access to that Bitcoin that maybe they can't find in that same quantity anywhere else.
Here's a potential scenario for you guys. Marathon often trades at its value of its Bitcoin holdings or below, even with its debt. And so basically their mining business at that time is deemed worthless, worth $0. They are in the prime position for a larger corporation, say Strategy. Strategy wouldn't do this, I don't think, but say a Strategy like company or a government to buy out and take that private and just own the Bitcoin itself, and then just start dismantling that business, firing their overpaid executives and winding down operations, only doing the ones that are profitable. They have some energy contracts, using those, and that could just be a way to acquire however many Bitcoin they have. What is it, 40,000 or something like that? Which honestly would probably be a really good thing to do, because Marathon is a terrible company in my opinion. But anyway, it's a little bit besides the point.
But no, if you think about it, like Tether's doing the same kind of thing right now. Tether realizes that they don't want to just hold Bitcoin. They want to have an active role in the development of Bitcoin and the mining of Bitcoin and have a shot at this. So Tether announced at the Bitcoin Conference 2025 that they're actually going to be the biggest Bitcoin mining company in the world, they think, by the end of 2025. So I could see if Strategy's smart, Strategy should be getting into Bitcoin mining, because and I don't know if Saylor just doesn't understand this. I think that that's a very bold claim to make, because I think he's one of the most intelligent people on the planet. But it's like Saylor doesn't seem to understand that his whole investment here, his whole company, everything going on in Strategy is very reliant on the Bitcoin network succeeding. And whether that's Bitcoin Core versus Bitcoin Knots, whether that's funding Bitcoin development projects, it doesn't seem like he has any interest in that. But like the whole thing that's keeping his company up is the Bitcoin network and the developers of the Bitcoin network.
I will say one thing is he has actually, Odell had a big backlash against him because he told Cathie Woods not to help fund Bitcoin developers.
Yep.
And he has multiple times said that the biggest threat to Bitcoin is overzealous developers that want to change Bitcoin and actually having changes go in that could, ruin the software. So I think he's actively not funding developers for Bitcoin with good purpose. I actually completely agree with him. And you can see this with, OpReturn getting merged. That was totally like, whichever way you fall on the fence, completely so controversial. And there's like 5 developers in Bitcoin Core that can merge something. And they just said, hey, we have consensus to do this. We think it's the right thing to do. We're just going to do it. And it's like the global Bitcoiners did not reach consensus on this. A very small group of people did. So I think Saylor is doing the right thing there. But I do agree that he doesn't support the Bitcoin network in a way that is very fundamental, which is actually using on-chain transactions, running your own node, proof of reserves. There's a few other things that, you know, he's not doing what I would consider the right thing for Bitcoin long term. But he's more focused on the kind of his long-term vision, which is accumulating the best pristine capital, which I think is an excellent play. And I think Bitcoin will survive and thrive without him advocating for the other parts of Bitcoin that are equally important.
Yeah. It's just, I see there's a lot of threats coming in the future with technology improvements and things like that. And, you know, making stupid changes like the Opportun, agree, does make sense. But there are going to be needs. There's going to be vulnerabilities that come up, I think, in the future that are going to have to be addressed. And that's why it's important to have a solid team of developers there. Nav, big shout out to Nav. USA bought Alaska from Russia for $7 million. Shows how much the dollar has lost its value. No doubt.
Wow. That's so crazy to put that in perspective. And I think they pull out more in oil than they paid, right? Like every single day. Yeah, what an investment. The Louisiana Purchase is another example of that. Again, something Saylor talks about all the time. Yeah, I mean, the land has been a great investment, especially, you know, back when it was, you know, the earlier that you invest, the more you're rewarded. And Bitcoin is, again, Saylor talks, he's so great with his analogies and descriptions, digital property, right? And buying cyber Manhattan. This is a way to look at it and a really way to quantify how valuable it will be in the future.
Yes. Eric G182 says, do you guys think that the average person will be able to buy Bitcoin in the future? It may just be reserved for the really wealthy and nation states. Rajat, what do you think about this?
They'll be able to buy it, but the amount that they're going to get is much smaller, right? Like today, if you buy $1, you'll be able to get 1,000 Satoshis. But at that point, if you buy $1, like you're getting 1 Satoshi. So what this person is saying, of course, is accurate. Like, let's say if you want to get 1 whole Bitcoin, it's gonna be nearly impossible for somebody to get 1 whole Bitcoin at $100 million. But if you have the money, you'll be able to do it. But if you don't have the money, then you won't be able to. That's just what the price is. It just shows you where the market is going. It shows you what you can afford. So at one point, maybe we can already say that Bitcoin is being reserved for the rich people, because at one point you could buy a whole Bitcoin for 1 cent. You could buy 100 million Satoshis for 1 cent. So we're going to a point where at some point 1 Satoshi is going to be 1 cent. Then 1 Satoshi is going to be 10 cents. Then it's going to be $1. So I kind of agree with what's being said here. It won't really be reserved for the really wealthy. I think everybody will be able to get Bitcoin, but they'll have to exchange their time, effort, energy, resources, the things that they have in exchange for Bitcoin. So let's say if you work a job, maybe you'll get paid in Bitcoin, or if you sell something, let's say you need to sell your car. Maybe that's one of the only ways for you to get Bitcoin. You have to find a Bitcoiner who wants your car. You have to sell your car to them, and that's how you get Bitcoin. It's not really going to be, I wouldn't say it's going to be reserved for the really wealthy and nation states, but the price will just go higher and higher. If you can afford it, you'll be able to buy some at any point. Let's say if you have $100 and 1 Bitcoin is worth $100 million, you'll be able to get 100 Satoshis. That's not a problem. It won't be reserved for only people who, let's say, are millionaires, billionaires, but you'll be able to get much, much less. That's the key takeaway here.
100%.
Great
Yeah,
answer.
you'll be able to get less, but I think the only way that you won't be able to buy Bitcoin in the future is if it's completely captured by someone or something that doesn't release any Bitcoin into the market. And then in that state, it's failed, in my opinion. So I don't see that ever happening. I think it just becomes more and more difficult to acquire bigger positions of Bitcoin, just as Rajat said. And there's a solution to that, sense of making it more divisible, even more divisible than a
Yeah.
sat, right? And again, you're not acquiring as much Bitcoin, but you're still able to acquire the same relative amount of purchasing power. That's really the only thing that matters. So I think it just becomes more divisible, and it still trades hands and exchanges, people working, people trading value, and all of that. It's yeah. Again, if it's not accessible by anybody, if nobody can buy it, then it doesn't work. So it has to happen like that.
Yeah, I kind of subscribe to the theory that at some point here, like if you talk to a Bitcoiner who's been here for 10 years already, they're spending their Bitcoin. They don't care like what the price is or anything. They're like, I bought this thing at $5. It's worth $100,000 now. And I think if you like put yourself in this scenario here, let's say that Bitcoin continues for 40% a year for the next 20 years. That at that point in 21 years from now, one SAT is going to be equal to $1. And so therefore you could go into, you could drive, you could do a whole trip across the USA for maybe 800 sats in gas. 800 sats.
Wow.
Like that's the world that we're going to be living in here. And so when you think about it that way, it's like if you have 20 million sats and it costs you 800 sats to go across the whole USA on a drive, like you're not just going to be hodling those sats, you're going to be spending those. And you're going to be spending those on the people who might not have Bitcoin yet. So I think that forever these Bitcoin will be circulating, because the higher the price of this thing goes, the more likely we are to part with those sats and therefore get them flowing through the economy. And at that point too, you're going to be able to buy a house for 500,000 sats, which you could buy for $500 worth of fake money today. Like this isn't 1,000 years away either. This is in 21 years from now, based on that compound growth rate. So yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
It might actually be sooner than that, especially with your example of housing, because in that time, as Bitcoin's price goes up, people are going to want to get rid of their houses. So we're going to see a higher supply of housing, and we're going to see a lower supply of Bitcoin at the same time. So it's just gonna compound. It's gonna be like
Right.
I don't know. Like it's gonna just go wild, right? Because at some point, in terms of the way that I see it, the price is just an exchange rate, right? So today you can buy 0.25 houses per Bitcoin. In total, there are something like 2.4 billion houses in the US, or sorry, in the world, and 150 million in the US alone. So even if you could just buy, even if you just go with the houses in the US, people say, oh, prime real estate, prime location. Real estate has, I mean, in the US, there's prime, it's prime real estate. That's what you would consider, because it has property, you get property rights. So even if it's just in the US, one house should cost something like 0.14 Bitcoin. So you should be able to buy 7 houses with 1 Bitcoin. And today you can buy 0.25. So think about how massively overvalued houses are.
Yep. Incredibly.
And how undervalued Bitcoin is overall,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And then that just filters into this thing, right? The average person won't be able to buy as much Bitcoin as they can today, but the things that they want will decrease in price. And let's say today you can earn 30,000 Satoshis per hour. So if you're getting $30 an hour, you're getting 30,000 Satoshis per hour. Maybe at that point you're making 30 Satoshis an hour.
Yeah.
So today you can buy, what is that? 1,000 hours worth of work in 1 hour.
Yep.
That's insane.
Correct.
So you got to stack
half a
now.
year. That's half a year of work.
It's crazy.
1,000 hours. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it like that. Like if you're with us here, if you agree in the fact that one day eventually, it might be in 21 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 50 years, those sats are going to have the purchasing power of $1. And if you are actually indeed doing this for your future generations, think about how much you're buying them in the future with just $1 or $2 today. Like think about the power of that 2,000 sats in 50 years from now, when your grandkids are going to be around using that Bitcoin. Think about how much you can buy them today for the future in that sense. I think that when people think about it that way, it's like, why would I not? Why would I store anything in anything other than Bitcoin right now? It just doesn't make any sort of sense to do that.
It sure doesn't. It should be treated as savings technology. That's what it works at right now. And eventually it'll become a medium of exchange because people will not accept fiat.
Yes.
That's when I see it becoming that medium of exchange that so many people have a problem with Bitcoin today because it can't be used at the corner store down the street. That isn't a problem. That really is not a problem. Eventually, it'll become used at that corner store because the owner of the corner store will be a Bitcoiner, understand Bitcoin, and demand Bitcoin and not want to accept fiat. That just diminishes rapidly before that person can exchange it for Bitcoin, right? So they'll want Bitcoin instead. And there'll be, a premium if you pay it in fiat. That'll start to happen more and more with services, businesses and services, a premium paid in fiat or a discounted Bitcoin, but you could look at it either way. And it's inevitable that it becomes a medium of exchange, but it has to happen over time as people acquire it as savings technology, as a store of value.
Yes. J Sauce question: how rare is a whole coiner female? Or are they just a myth and a legend? Or as Mark said in the chat here, a mythical mermaid? I think whole coiners, male or female, are going to be incredibly, incredibly rare in the future, in 10 years from now, and even more so in 100 years from now. It's just, I think people are really underestimating how much one Bitcoin is going to hold. Even today, one Bitcoin, $103,000 US. That's nuts. That's insane. It's just the beginning. But I think the point there is that, we shouldn't be focused on trying to get to one Bitcoin. It should just be realizing that one day one sat is going to be $1 and just try to get as many sats as you can and learn how to protect those sats. And that's kind of like all we can do right now. Add as much value as you can, take fiat or take Bitcoin, but convert the fiat into Bitcoin and store it that way.
I think we might have hit peak whole coiners. I think we may have hit peak whole coiners.
Wow.
I think the trajectory will probably start going down. People will hold more of a portion of Bitcoin.
What do you think, Rajat? Have we hit peak whole coiner status?
I was actually I was trying to ask a question about what Foros was saying there. Do you guys think that as more millionaires figure it out, aren't they going to want to get a whole coin and they're never going to sell? I have a feeling that whole coiners might actually increase because retailers still selling their Bitcoin, right? But then there's also other people who have thousands of Bitcoin. Like let's say whenever MicroStrategy buys 1,000 Bitcoin, they're basically eliminating 1,000 whole coiners. And they've been buying 1,000 Bitcoin a week. Right. So they're eliminating 1,000 whole coiners every single week.
That's exactly why I think there's going to be less whole coiners from now on, is because there isn't 1,000 millionaires every single week buying a whole coin. Or and maybe they are, but maybe they're buying multiple coins, right? Maybe they're buying 2, 3, 20 coins and a couple million worth of Bitcoin. And then they're eliminating the ability for other whole coiners out there as well, because they're holding on to them.
Yeah, when they figure it out, they want 5, 10, 15. They want as much as they can. But then at some point, it's going to be a competition to get to the next 0.1. Then it's going to be a competition to get to the next 0.01. Like if you have 0.97 Bitcoin and you're a millionaire, you're probably going to do whatever you can to get that extra 0.03, that extra 3 million Satoshis. You're going to work as hard as you can. You're going to create as much value as you can. If you have extra rental properties, you're going to get rid of them to get that 0.03 because it's a status symbol.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. Even at the Bitcoin conference, there was a specific tag. Like you could get a band that said Nakamoto on it, and I think it was supposed to be for people who have 1,000 Bitcoin or something like that. So at some point, it's kind of stupid to have that if you pay $25,000 for that. It's kind of dumb. But the fact that you have 1,000 Bitcoin, you have the money to do it.
Yeah.
Right. So the people who have, like I was saying, the people who have 0.97. They're going to do whatever they can to get to 1. If you have 0.097 or 0.097, you're going to do anything you can to get to that 0.1, right? If you have 0.0097, you're going to do anything you can to get to that 0.01. And at some point, because the competition is just going to get crazier and crazier to get to 1 million Satoshis, 10 million, 100 million Satoshis, it's just going to push the price higher and higher. It's inevitable. And I think that goes to the question that we have in the start comments. Why are we so obsessed with Bitcoin hitting $1 million? We're not obsessed with it. We just want you to figure it out before it hits $1 million, because we know it's going to happen. We knew that governments were going to adopt Bitcoin. We knew that there was going to be adoption from Wall Street, it's not that we're celebrating that's happening. We're celebrating that Bitcoiners predicted that and they were right. That's the point. So let's say in a year, 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years, people are going to come back to this video and they're going to be wondering why we're talking about $1 million Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's now $10 million. Now it's $50 million. So they're going to think, okay, these guys were so early. They knew what they were talking about. They were into this thing for such a long time. They figured it out so long ago. Maybe we should listen to them. But we don't want you guys to do that after. We don't want you to do that after it hits 1 million. We want you to do that before. That's why we've created our channels. That's why we created the Maple Bitcoin channel. It's to get you on board before the rest of the world figures it out, before all the millionaires want it, before all the billionaires.
So start stacking and get yourself towards that one Bitcoin. One of these. They're only $1.50 on Amazon. They're not that bad.
Amazing.
Kind of my theory, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this, but my theory on this whole thing is that millionaires are actually going to be the ones who get screwed most by Bitcoin. Because billionaires, they don't have any worries ever. They could wait till the price is $200 million for a Bitcoin and they could still probably get to one Bitcoin at that point. Like $1 billion is just so much more than you ever need. So like billionaires, what's that?
Like Warren Buffett, even if he gets it like 10 years from now, he'll still have more Bitcoin than all of us combined.
Exactly. So billionaires will be unaffected. But then for the average person, the people that we're talking to in this chat right now, we actually have the ability to get ahead of millionaires here. This is an opportunity for the average person to understand what's happening, to take a little bit of risk, to put your ball sack on the table and say, you know what? I'm tired of that system. I want to be a millionaire in the future. And there's no way that I can do that in the current circumstances that we have today. So as an average person, this is an opportunity. But for millionaires, most millionaires will never have one Bitcoin. There's going to be average people who live in a van right now. I was going to say the F word there, but I stopped. A van right now who have one Bitcoin, and they're going to have way more wealth in a couple decades from now than somebody who has 3 houses, 10 cars, all the bullshit. That's what's going to happen here. The millionaires are going to be most impacted by Bitcoin. Some will react early, but many of the millionaires will be burned by Bitcoin.
Well, most of those millionaires have all assets. They're, those millions of dollars or $1 million is all tied up in fairly illiquid assets like real estate or stocks and bonds or whatever, right? And they have to make the hard decision to sell something when they don't know if timing's right and all of that. It's very difficult. If somebody is just a pleb, they're just scraping off a few $100s after a paycheck and just slamming that into Bitcoin. That's pretty easy to do, right? With these people, there's a lot of mental hoops they have to hop through. They have to figure out if Bitcoin's right for them. All this, it's going to take time. And yeah, they're just, all those assets that they might already have that makes them a millionaire, those are all going to trend to the value of like the Bitcoin that underlies them, which is in real estate, nothing, right? If they own some Tesla, maybe it'll go down to the value of the Tesla's Bitcoin, right? But yeah, it's all going to trend to the value of the Bitcoin that they hold, their net worth. And so if we can acquire more Bitcoin, we're going to have a higher net worth at a certain point than the millionaires of today.
Yeah.
There's people, here's the crazy thing. There's people watching the show today who will have more Bitcoin than countries.
Yeah. Wow.
That's insane.
That's crazy to think about. Yeah.
Because they can't create more of it. No matter how many people want to hold this asset, no matter how long it takes for people to figure out what this asset is, they can't create more of it. Every 10 minutes, new Bitcoin is released for the next 140 years, but it's already been distributed. It's already been distributed, and they're going to have to come take it from us. And that's why, again, you got to focus on how you're protecting this thing. It doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have today. You need to have the conviction, you need to have the security in place, and you need to have an inheritance plan in place. Otherwise, in a decade from now, it doesn't matter if you had 100 Bitcoin today. If you're not doing things properly, if you're not building the proper foundation for this Bitcoin right now, it's going to be gone. And you're going to be the guy who's telling the story forever that, oh, back in 2025, I had 50 million sats. You don't want to be that guy telling the story. You want to be the guy that is on 100 acres of land and is spending 500 sats a day maintaining their lifestyle because you took the time back in 2025 to understand this asset and protect this asset.
Yeah. And in 20 years, nobody's going to care if you had Bitcoin before. It doesn't matter. If you had Bitcoin, like there's people who, like the guy who gave away his 10,000 Bitcoin for pizza, he can't go around telling merchants that, oh yeah, I used to have 10,000 Bitcoin. they want your Bitcoin now. They don't care if you used to have it. They care about it now. The key here is to get through to the point where Bitcoin actually hits $1 million. Most people are not going to get there. They're going to sell early. They're going to sell at 200K. They're going to sell at 300K, or they're just not going to buy because they're going to expect that the first 100K took 15 years and the second 100K is going to take another 15 years because they can't grasp compounding.
Yeah, it's better to have Bitcoin today than to have a story of having Bitcoin in the past.
Yes.
It's not as valuable.
No,
Agreed.
nobody's going to care.
No.
You're going to love telling the story. Every time you go out and have a couple of beers, you're going to love telling the story, but nobody's going to care because you don't have that Bitcoin. So who cares? So yeah, you're absolutely right there. We should start wrapping up here, boys. Man, these 2 hour show today absolutely flew by. I like, how does this stuff happen? I don't know. Maybe it's just fun, but, anyways, I want to say a couple shout outs here. We did receive a couple more zaps, 21 sats. Anonymously, we received a 28 sat zap anonymously and 821 sats anonymously. So if you're watching the show on Maple Bitcoin, Forest, Rajat, or my channel later, you can scan afterwards and we'll maybe give you a shout out if we remember next show, or you can send it to maplebitcoin@coinos.io if you're watching this on your smartphone and can't scan the QR code. Do you guys have any final thoughts for the week? Heading into the weekend, it's Friday, just finished the Guinness. How do you guys want to leave this off today? What's your inspirational words?
I'll just say, there's going to be short-term news events that are going to whipsaw that price around. God forbid there's actually World War III, some terrible things like that. Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin's going to go up, right? The problem with all of that stuff is that it's war and people are, being damaged by it. But again, that doesn't affect your stack. Any dip is a buying opportunity, and if you hold for a long term. So that's just what I would think about as far as Bitcoin goes and the news and all of that that's happening.
Yeah.
Rajat?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the next few years. We're going to be sitting at this. We're going to be doing this weekly we're trying to do this for a decade, right? Today we see this, we have this headline where people are telling us, oh, you're crazy for thinking that we're going to see $1 million by the end of this year. Who knows, in a decade, we're going to be maybe posting about $100 million by the end of the year. So as usual, I mean, the best thing you can do is just stack Bitcoin. The rest of it is the details. I had a conversation with somebody, a one-on-one conversation with someone yesterday who literally just wanted to get on a call with me so that I could convince her to buy Bitcoin. That was it. She understood what it was, like but she just couldn't pull the trigger. Yeah. I just had to talk her through it. Hey, download the app, set up your transfer for moving money from your bank account to your Bitcoin exchange. If you can start doing this on your own, do it. In 10 years, and so today the buys are going to seem very difficult. If you buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, in 10 years you're going to think, wow, that $1,000 buy is now paying for my rent for the next 3 years, right? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, the fact that we have access to this asset right now so early into its creation, I mean, we're so early.
Yes, we are so incredibly early. And I just want to leave people thinking about this. Think about Bitcoin like a battery. And that's all it is. It's a network, it's a currency, but it's the best way to store your time and energy. That's it. So focus on adding as much value as you possibly can to this world. Whatever it is that you do good, do that thing. Whatever you're earning, whether it's fiat, gold, Bitcoin, who knows, fruit roll-ups, whatever you're earning, turn it into Bitcoin. Store your time and energy there. Be here for the long term. Run through a couple exercises using those websites. I'll put them in the pinned comments here below for those reverse keggers, and then Joe's website as well. But just look at the math. Like, don't trust us here. Look at what's happened. Think about this logically. Do you think that we're at the end of this? Has this demand for Bitcoin peaked? Or do you think that we're at the beginning of this thing? And if you think that we're at the beginning of this thing, then there is no limit to how high this thing can go. If you understand that and start putting in those numbers and start seeing yourself in 10 and 20 years from now, and what your sats you have today are going to be able to purchase you and your family in that time. Focus on conviction, security, and putting an inheritance plan in place, and you will not regret 2025 like most people will. We are so incredibly lucky to be here right now. We're not lucky to be watching this stream, but we're lucky that we're alive here in 2025. 100 years ago, they had to live through fiat slavery. 100 years from now, they'll give anything to be exactly where you are today. So just enjoy it, smile, add as much value, and store your wealth in the best Bitcoin, the best battery that has ever existed before, which is Bitcoin.
Nice.
So with that, boys, thank you very much, everybody who sent in a zap. We very, very much appreciate it. We have no sponsors here. We never will. And that's the best way that you can support us, with the QR code right beside Forrest's head there. So thank you, everybody. We really enjoy this time together. Friday, 2 p.m. is our favorite time of the week. And hopefully you show up for the next one next Friday. Thanks, fellas. We'll see you on the next one.